There we go.
Great. Council President, we can start. I'm just going to read the Open Public Meetings Act for everyone.
Thank you.
I would like to advise all those present that notice of this meeting has been provided to the public in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act, and that notice was published in the city website, El Especialito, the Newark Star Ledger, Jersey Journal, and also placed on the bulletin board in the lobby of City Hall. Written objections, if any, shall be made to the city clerk. We can stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. Pledge allegiance
to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Councilman Cohen.
Here.
Councilwoman Fisher.
Here.
Councilwoman Jabor.
Here.
Councilman Prezazano. Councilman Quintero.
Present.
Paul, where was Paul? I thought I saw
Paul.
Present.
There you go. Councilman Ramos.
Present.
Councilman Russo.
Present.
And Council President Doyle.
present.
We have quorum present.
Just real quick, President Doyle, do you have your camera on or the opening slid over?
Oh, you are
There we
correct.
There you go.
Thank
Excellent. I'm just going to read the
Thank
special
you.
meeting real quick. Dear
Yep.
City Clerk, please be advised, as Council President of the City of Hoboken, I hereby call a special meeting of the governing body for Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, to begin promptly at 7 p.m. for the following purpose: resolution to amend the calendar year 2025 budget and also the claims for the amount of $4,731,316.26.
Thank
Action
you,
will be
Mr. Wall.
taken and other matters will be discussed and acted upon. Please ensure that city council members are noticed of this special meeting in accordance with applicable law and rules. Also, please publicly notice this special meeting as required by the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. Very yours truly, Jim Doyle, Council President.
Well done, Jerry. Thank you. Okay, so we do. Director Stratton is. Do you have some news for us from the state of New Jersey?
So the state's approved the budget amendment before the council this evening. I distributed a copy of the amendment to the city clerk this afternoon. There was one change to the amendment that was proposed and attached to Acela. That change was not a dollar amount. It was reflected in how we had organized the group health appropriation amendment. And so that line, the state requested that we move from inside the cap to outside the cap. It's reflected on the PDF on page 3. And there was an email that was sent to the council reflecting what the change was, not in substance, but in the form as we had submitted it to the state of New Jersey.
Okay, and we agree with the clarification that the state provided. We don't disagree.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And Jerry, I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me, regrettably, but so the first item on the agenda, my recollection, is for the introduction, the resolution introducing the amendments to the budget.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right. So we have 2 sponsors. So call a vote.
Council President, just for the record, who are the 2 sponsors?
I'm willing to sponsor it. And Councilwoman Fisher just raised her hand.
Great.
Council President. Are we going to have any discussions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you chime right in. There will be there's a public portion at the end as well. This is akin to a first reading, but you're welcome to discuss it. Yes. Councilman Prezanzano, you want to go first?
I'll be last. It's fine or whatever. Councilman Russo can.
Yeah, I just have some questions on the actual amendment itself, Council President.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I just want to understand the process here. So these amendments they did not come through the subcommittee. They were worked on by yourself and Councilwoman Fisher, I'm assuming, because you are the two sponsors.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And in those amendments, we're looking at, let's talk about group health for a second, since that was a later change. Am I to understand that the group health is not a reduction, but now it's just a shifting of that $265,000?
The group health appropriation is a reduction. It's a reduction from what was introduced of $265,000. What's changed is that there's an in cap and excluded from cap appropriation, and the state has asked us to move the reduction of $265,000 from inside the cap to be excluded in the cap. So the net change was minus 265 from our group health appropriation.
So the total dollar amount is the same.
Sure. So there's an increase of $265 outside the cap then. Is that my understanding?
The change is within the cap, the number went up because we're removing it. And out excluded from the cap, the number went down because we're including it in that portion. So it was on one line, it increased by 265 because we had put it in the wrong place. So the amendment that the state approved is moving it from page 3 on line H to page 3 in subsection 8.
So in the overall budget, including inside cap and outside cap, there's a net of 0.
As amended.
Correct.
The amendment is as submitted to the administration, reduced appropriations by $1.585 million.
Right.
And the amendment that the council is acting on tonight has that same dollar amount reduction.
So it was just a budgetary move. There's not really a dollar amount change.
That is correct.
Right. Okay. I appreciate that. In the amendments that I offer, I offered $6 million in operating cuts. And I was very clear in our conversations in the committee and publicly at our meeting that I was willing to compromise even down to $3 million worth of cuts, which is probably a little bit more than double of what we're voting on here tonight. So my understanding is that this budget is about $7 million more than last year's actual spending as amended. Is that correct?
I don't have last year's total budget number in front of me, but if you're
9 million and it's an increase of 4.5%. So if you
not
take
over what
4.5 off of 69 million, you get the number that was last year.
No, not what was budgeted last year, what was spent last year, Council President. I think we've been talking past each other when I talk about what was spent last year versus what was budgeted last year. So last year, if we compare this amendment to what was spent, we're about $7 million more. And you don't have that in front of you, Caleb?
No, but I can confirm whether that number is correct.
Can you just confirm that for me? And then the only other question I have is our former business administrator made a very clear point that he wanted to talk about our structural deficit and borrowing from surplus. And in this amendment, we're actually increasing that borrowing from surplus from our parking utility by the sum of about $300,000 more. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
And Caleb, from your perspective, and I know different folks have different perspectives on how they're going to manage a budget. From your perspective, do you see this as a big issue as our former business administrator did? By borrowing surplus?
I intend to communicate to the council from each one of our directors and provide a memo on the impacts of the cuts to our operations. I wouldn't necessarily want to characterize or summarize what, from our director's perspective, the cuts mean, but it creates a year-over-year increase in the amount of surplus we're using from HPU. And it creates increased budgetary pressure for next year because we will need to use the same amount of surplus in the budget if we want to zero out how much surplus we're using from parking utility.
And we don't have any plans for a reduction in our structural deficit for next year, right?
I am preparing a memo to the council that will talk about where we had left that conversation at budget introduction. So there is not a change in the deficit estimates from when we did budget introduction to now. In fact, our group health spend has increased this year over what we are appropriating, and we are seeing and projecting reserve depletion in our group health appropriation.
Can I just add one thing with regard to the parking utility? We didn't just take 300,000 more. What we asked them to do is cut their operating expenses by 300,000, so they would spend less. And if they're spending less, you know, in HPU, it's just revenues less expenses gives you whatever's left over can go to the general fund. And we asked them to cut $300,000 out of the expense side. That if that cut is something that remains year over year, then that 300,000 extra that we get from HPU can remain year over year as well.
No,
So
I don't see that in, I don't see that cut in the parking utility. What, and why would a cut in the parking utility revenue
not in revenue.
result in using $300,000 more in our surplus for a budget?
It's not 300 cut in revenue. It's 300 cut in OE. So they have $4 million in OE, right? For consultants, for a million different expenses, and they didn't fully spend it last year. And we've asked them to cut the expense side. So if I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if HPU, let's say HPU, and I know this isn't the number, if they made, you know, $10 million in revenues and they had $4 million in expenses, $6 million would be left over that could go into the general fund. We asked them to cut that $4 million down to 3.7 million. So it would reduce their costs that they're incurring and free up more of the revenues to be able to send up.
I don't see it that way. I see a garage revenue increase from what was introduced to what's being amended by $300,000. So I think you might be talking about something different, but that's not what happened. There's a $300,000 expected increase in garage revenue for the amended budget, which equates to that $300,000. That's where they're getting that $300,000 from the surplus to add to our deficit in the general fund.
Got it. I don't have it in front of me, but that wasn't what the ask was. The ask was to reduce the expense. It gets you to the same place.
It doesn't, but it truly doesn't, right? If we're just creating a increase in anticipated revenue, which may or may not come to fruition, versus cutting $300,000 somewhere else, which is a pretty hard and fast decision. Yeah. So I don't think what your request is from your perspective, Councilwoman, was what was carried out in this amendment.
Yeah, and I don't know if Jim, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell, but it was always meant to reduce operating expenses by 300,000 and free up 300,000 for.
No, well, it's surplus. It was adding, instead of 8 million, 8.3 million from the surplus.
Sure.
Where the $300,000 come from, I think, is the question, Council President. Councilwoman Fisher saying that she thinks it's a reduction in spending, when in fact I think it's just a increase in anticipated revenue from our garage. Can we get some clarification on that?
We balanced the HPU budget by increasing projected revenue from the garages and we did not make cuts. We added $300,000 to the use of surplus from HPU.
That wasn't the ask. It gets you to, and I agree with Mike that they're two different things. We had asked specifically to cut the HPU operating expense, not add revenues.
I took what was forwarded to me and I put it in a format to send to the auditor and send to the state. So if there's a
Yeah.
miscommunication there, then
And I
Councilman Russo, are you
Yeah, I'm
finished with the
sorry,
questions?
Councilman. By all
All right.
means, all yours.
Great. All right. Yeah, so I think I'm going to piggyback on the back of what Councilman Russo had mentioned. And I'm going to ask these several questions here. The 265K of the group health, that is coming from surplus or not? I know we talked about line items in and out of the cap. Is that 265, is that
it's
surplus money?
it's a reduction in our appropriation, which will
Okay.
likely lead to the use of healthcare reserves to fully
Okay.
fund healthcare. And so that results in a reduction in a healthcare reserve.
Okay.
It
So,
can result. I will not say it will result. It
okay.
can result in
So
a reduction in healthcare.
51%, I'll give you that. So it's not 100%. How's that? So, and then as Councilman Russo pointed out, the 300K, so it's 565K from surpluses, let's say, use that term loosely. So that's $1 million of cuts. Now, I looked at some of the cuts proposed.
Paul, healthcare is not from surplus. They have a separate off-balance sheet reserve. Has nothing to do with the surplus. They just have a reserve account. So it's
still taking from a reserve. Yes or no?
It is reducing our expenses relating to healthcare that are funded in year and out of a reserve balance, but it's not surplus.
Okay. I'm going to go and look down here. As Councilwoman Fisher pointed out, that we do have some similarities, but there was some interest. I have some questions here that I know the health department lost a grant, 300K. I know we got some back, and Caleb, we had a quick discussion about that. So and Council President and I spoke about this as well. The number that we dropped from 812 in the proposed to 622, the grant that we got doesn't cover everything, correct? How much is it, 25K? It only covers of that?
The proposed cuts to healthcare were 190, and the grant that we received is 25, but we are still waiting for future guidance from the state, what additional monies that we are going to get back. So if you remember at budget introduction, we had discussed some of the grants that we had lost. We partially received some of that grant, which is reflected in this budget. And if we receive more of that grant, which we expect to, it'll be reflected in a Chapter 159 appropriation later in the year.
Okay.
So the salary and wage cuts to the health are an appropriation that we had made anticipating losing the grant. And that has been removed from this budget. The council is considering it.
Okay. And I'm struggling with one on here. Might seem, again, 100K is 100K, but we're cutting a division of housing operating expenses. And the only question I asked there is, between the lead expenditures, between all the rent control stuff that's going on, they've been understaffed. In my proposals, I didn't touch any of the departments that were kind of needing things. And yet we're cutting 100 grand from something that has been at the forefront. And I think a lot of people are running on for mayor on that. So I'm wondering why we're cutting 100 grand from a department that we're supposed to be actually expanding or helping give them resources to get the job done. So I'm a question on that. My concern, again, some of the other stuff I agree with. However, the borrowing at it or whatever, the reserve, whatever you want to call it, the 265 and the 300, that's kind of the same old math we try to do every year. But, as in this budget, our surpluses were rated to get here. So the only thing we could do is slash spending. So, on this number here, I feel as if we could have done better. And then I have a question to Council President that Councilman Russo brought up. If it didn't go through subcommittee, what happens here? Because that's not following protocol.
Well, that's not accurate. The protocol that Councilman Russo has raised is a protocol from 2 years ago, and the budget has always been treated differently. It is not, and with all due respect, each year this is like Lyndon Johnson, lobbying for votes for legislation. And each year we have to get 5 people who are willing and in agreement on a budget. And when we get there, you know, we're there. And so it is not something where, in the traditional sense, Councilman Cohen did hold budget discussion meetings of the subcommittee, and budget issues were discussed. It's not as if, but this particular amendment was distributed to the subcommittee, but it is not necessary or essential that the subcommittee have a meeting to discuss the budget amendment. It has historically, that has not been always the case. Sometimes it has, but it is not a hard and fast rule. I think, Councilman Ramos has been instrumental in the past couple of years with former Councilwoman Giatino on working out. I think Councilwoman Jabor and I think it was Councilwoman Giatino 2 years ago worked out, a budget impact.
You mean I work on the budget, Jim? Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
No, I'm giving you credit. There are times whoever gets to 5, however we get there, is
apparently I don't know anything about budgeting though, so I appreciate that, Jim.
Yes,
Council President.
Yeah.
The only
I had just one question, if I may.
again, I just wanted to clarify my position on it.
I get it. There's a sausage gets made in various ways when it comes to the budget, and that's what Council President is trying to say. It's like it's a little bit different than everything else we deal with throughout the year. So I understand that process, right? The goal is to get to 5, and how you get there is how you get there sometimes. But one question I had in what Council President Zano and I presented, we worked on. We were very cognizant of the fact that many members of the council didn't want to dip in the surplus anymore. So that's why in the $2.2 million we proposed, we didn't do any of surplus dipping. But one concern I do have with regards to the group health there is, why do we make the decision to go into those reserves when I know we had a lot of conversation for next year when we're looking at potential 20 to 30% increase from the state of New Jersey with regards to our group health insurance? So why would we want to dip into that area as opposed to other areas in the budget? Because that's coming down the pike no matter what.
Sure. So, and I'm happy to respond because I was the initiator of it, and I'll also we're basically, no matter what we do, we are dipping into future use of surplus or future depleting some of our reserves, right? Like the originally, I think the budget was proposed at a 10% increase where we wouldn't have had as much of an issue. But everything we do, whether it's, minor cuts on individual expense items, you guys had some in your proposal, Mike had some in his, we had some in ours, we're asking the administration to spend less, but we're not requiring them to spend less, right? It's up to them if they want to spend less. And if they don't spend less, all we're doing by cutting the budget is cutting our ability to have surplus for later years. So when Councilman Russo was saying, we're 7 million over what we actually spent last year, we spend everything that we budget. We just don't necessarily spend it in that year. So even though we actually spent a lot less than what's budgeted this year, a lot of, a couple $1 million is going to go into the surplus next year that will be available for us for a revenue line item. So that we're just at a point where we're every single cut we make, we're kind of cutting into our ability to fund ourselves next year. So the reason on 2 specific ones on healthcare, we have a reserve, and we're going to bump into, we have an existing reserve of a few $1 million. We are expecting to see increased not only contributions from the state, but also expenses next year. We have reserves to get through probably next year. This is a minor change to give taxpayers relief this year, but we have a bigger problem next year. The Office of Housing, to Paul's question, we looked at, and I'm sure you guys did, everyone looked at it. We went line item by line item and looked at how much was spent this year versus what was in last year's budget, like already. And the housing department, just on the OE side, they just spent very, very little relative to what their budget was for the year. And we already gotten through the entire year. They still have a pretty hefty budget for the rest of the year. We just took a piece of that. So it's not necessarily saying we don't want them to have funding available for what they want to do. They're just literally not spending money. They didn't spend it last year and they didn't spend it this year, and we're already more than halfway through the year. So I think just like you guys, we wanted to find ways to give taxpayers relief this year, and it's been an imperfect process, right? And so we just tried to find places that looked like we could get from, here through into next year, but irrespective of where we take it from, whoever's mayor next year, we have a real issue next year. And it doesn't matter if we took 265 from healthcare, if we took 100 from housing, or if we took 100 or 200, whatever the number was from gasoline or something. Like we're going to bump into, we'll have less surplus next year, and we're going to bump into really having to identify revenue sources to help offset cost increases next year.
Council President, just two points. Well, first, I don't think that assessment is 100% accurate on a grand scale. I think that might be certain council members' strategies for how they want to handle their budget. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do that. We overcharge our residents year over year so that we could generate this surplus. That's what we do. That's why we spend less than what we budget, because we overcharge them. This has been an ongoing thing. Our former business administrator made it very clear that these are issues that have been going on, and we need to just call it what it is. That's first and foremost. Second, just to clarify the point before, Council President, I wasn't saying that people shouldn't be lobbying to get 5 votes for a budget. My only point in having the discussion is that we have a subcommittee system so that we could discuss what's going on. No one ever said that we have to leave that subcommittee in agreement, but to totally discount the subcommittee and not have those conversations, I have no problem with presenting amendments to the subcommittee and us having that discussion, walking out of there and everybody saying, Michael, we don't agree with you, we're going in a different direction. That's the process. I have no problem with that. But to totally ignore the subcommittee's role is troubling to me. I think we should have brought that back to the subcommittee. Councilwoman Fisher could have came into that subcommittee, presented her ideas, so on and so forth, and we could have made decisions from there. But we didn't do that. We actually went outside the subcommittee. We talked about how those amendments were going to appear. Everybody lobbied outside that subcommittee, and now we're here. And I have no problem with that. That's the system. But to not discuss it in the committee that you, Council President, formed so that we could deal with our finances, that just, to me, it just doesn't sit right. But
all right, well, I hear your point. I think I disagree with.
Understood.
We are also facing, there's a deadline, and we had to get the state to approve this. We had to get our auditors to put it together. So to go to the state, we had to have a special meeting. We have another meeting on the 20th. So we were not making much progress from May 7th until, the 17th.
You are preaching to the choir. I asked our former business
right.
administrator to start that process in November of last year.
Yep. Anyway, and I don't think I created any. This was just the regular administration, and finance subcommittee. There was no special subcommittee, ad hoc committee created for the budget.
No. You created the finance subcommittee as the council president. You make that choice.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mean the composition of it?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I thought you meant.
No. I'm sorry if you misunderstood
a
me.
new subcommittee. No. Anyway, okay.
Council President,
Yeah, I was gonna say, Councilman Cohen, I saw you had your hand up, so at least we have some decorum.
Council President, just a few quick points in response as chair of the Finance Committee. Number one, we had a Finance Committee meeting scheduled before our last council meeting. I dialed in, Councilwoman Jabour dialed in, but nobody else dialed in. We didn't have a quorum, and we rescheduled it for a week later after that council meeting at the request of Councilman Russo. And at that council meeting, we made sure that Councilman Russo had Councilwoman Fisher's proposed amendment, got it sent to him, and yes, we did. And
You may have
and
asked
we
for that,
hang
Councilman,
on,
but that did
Councilman. I
not
did not
happen.
interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. Please, please, please. I'm sure the council president will recognize you when I'm done. Thank you. So it was sent to Councilman Russo. He had an opportunity to look at it. We told him that it was not in final form, that there were discussions between Councilman Doyle and Councilwoman Fisher. He certainly could have inserted himself into those discussions if he chose to, if he wanted to. He did not. The council president referred to the fact that in the last few years, when there have been negotiations over the budget, those discussions have taken place between individual council members like Councilwoman Giatino, Councilman Ramos, Councilwoman Jabour, Councilman Doyle have had one-off conversations. Those discussions did not take place in the committee format. Councilman Russo loudly objected to any tax increases, but was not part of any substantive discussions about what a compromise might look like. And that is typically how it's done. Nothing different was done this year than in prior years. And then finally, my other comment I want to make is that Councilman Russo said that a surplus in the budget reflects overcharging residents, and that's just false. A surplus in the budget is good municipal budget practice. That's what the state recommends. That's what our auditors recommend. That is good municipal finance. If we do not have adequately funded surpluses, we risk adverse ratings consequences, and that's something that I'm concerned about, and it's something that I do wish that the surplus was better funded than this budget, but I recognize that compromise is necessary. And finally, Councilman Doyle referred to the fact that we're on a deadline. And people have been pushing for budget. This budget has been in the council's hands since May. And we're finally voting on this on a special meeting. People have been complaining for months about the fact that we haven't had a budget to vote on. Today we're not voting on the budget. We're just simply introducing it. And that's what's happening tonight. I think this is progress, and that's a good thing. Again, it's a compromise. I think the budget should be larger, but I accept the fact that we are where we are, and that this is where we are. So I think that I want to thank Councilman Doyle and thank Councilwoman Fisher for doing the work of getting this amendment together and garnering the support of their colleagues. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen.
Council President, quick point.
If
Sorry to interrupt.
President
I get it, but it needs to be said. I know Councilman Cohen asked that be shared with me at our subcommittee meeting, but it was not shared with me until I asked again. So I didn't have the opportunity to insert myself in that. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, because although you asked, Councilman Cohen, it doesn't mean it happened.
Thank you, Councilman.
Well, it did happen. It may not have happened as quickly as you wanted it, but you got it. So, but anyway.
Councilman Presenzano?
Yeah, I have a question. I know some of my other colleagues have expressed that they wanted to raise taxes, and now you have 5 votes. I would like to hear, or I'd like to know what my other colleagues are thinking. I mean, if everything's done, we just work for 5 votes, being that I'm probably not one of those 5 votes. What is everybody else's thought process here? I mean, I know that some of my colleagues have expressed that they'd like to raise taxes, and I would just like
taxes.
Yeah, well, raising taxes more than what's being proposed, even more than the 7%. I mean, I just want to know what everybody's thought process here is, because we got to to get to 5. I just want to hear what everybody else said, because this will go back to what I said about subcommittees and having discussions, is that if we don't have reports, we don't know what's happening inside those subcommittees. And I'm not trying to call anybody out here, but I'm just curious how we got to this point so that I can understand what everybody's view is, being that this is just an introduction and it is important and it's late in the year. I just want to know how we got there.
Councilman Quintero, you raised your hand, or would you like to?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you for acknowledging that we are raising taxes. But, look, when we started this conversation months ago, and stress months, dragged out process that involved a lot of conversations. Yeah, the idea is we need healthy surpluses. And if we continue to raid them, that's a problem for us because when the actual rainy day comes, then we will have nothing there to tap into it. Per Councilman Cohen, a surplus is not overcharging. It is saving. It is committing to saving for a rainy day. And so we have that. My preference is not to raid that surplus too much when it's not necessary. However, again, as we drag this process out, my preference is also not to drastically cut city services where we're going to put our police, fire, critical services at need unnecessarily at the moment. We want to still maintain control and have some ability to manage our own futures here. And so, as it was trending, unless we compromise, we will face a state takeover, which means we lose control, which means we will have drastically inflated tax increases or significant cuts to personnel, municipal staff, police, fire, anything and everything that we want or need. We will not be able to control what we do. So, do we leave it to chance in the state and whatever they're going to do, whatever they're going to deem is the right thing for us, or do we compromise? And I thank Councilman Doyle and Council President Doyle, his leadership, and working with Councilman Fisher and coming up with this compromise, so that we can maintain control at least for another year, so we can try to plan how we're going to get out of this pickle that we find ourselves in. Because we do need to restore our surpluses to a healthy level. I'd rather us as a city, as a council, and whoever's in these seats next year have the control to do that, listening to the people and making those decisions on behalf of the people rather than leaving it to the state, which is where we were headed should we not come to a compromise, which we have now.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Ramos?
I just want to add one point, if I may, Council President, just in regards to the process, because it seems like it's almost like insinuated that council members are just sitting here since the May introduction of the budget, that no one was actually doing any work and no conversations were happening. That's when, Council President Zano and I submitted our amendments in early June. We had conversations with the business administrator, Council President Zano and yourself, Council President, had conversations about budget amendments. So conversations were happening throughout that time. It wasn't like no one was active in trying to move ideas forward throughout this process. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that there were ongoing conversations from the first introduction up until today throughout this process, where there were disagreements throughout that time. Yes, and that's fine. That's expected. That's anticipated. But some people just and trying to insinuate that nothing was happening. We had it for a long time, and we're just doing nothing with the budget when it was introduced. It just falls. Just want to clarify that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. All right. I think anybody else or?
Sure. I'll jump in, Council President.
Okay, Councilwoman.
Without belaboring the point, I would just reiterate, having been in the role of finance chair in the past, there were several years within the last 4 or 5, I suppose. This process, in my experience, was always outside of the finance subcommittee. And at different times, I worked with different council members in the spirit of getting to 5 votes, frankly. And Councilman Ramos and I, a couple of those years, had conversations and had those discussions kind of on the side for the sake of trying to just get to some consensus. So I just want to thank Council President Doyle and Councilman Fisher for working together for purposes of coming to this consensus, which reflects kind of how it was handled in past years. And last year, I recall Councilman Giattino and I think, had been able to get there. So I appreciate the time that was spent.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. All right, Mr. Lore, please call the vote.
On resolution F1, Councilman Cohen,
Aye.
Councilman Fisher,
Yes.
Councilman Jabor,
Yes.
Councilman Provenzano,
No.
Councilman Quintero,
Aye.
Councilman Ramos,
No.
Councilman Russo,
No.
Council President Doyle.
Aye.
It passes. And now for the claims.
Claims. Seeing no hands, Mr. Lore, please call the vote.
Councilman Cohen on claims.
Aye.
Councilwoman Fisher,
Yes.
Councilwoman Jabor,
Yes.
Councilman Prezzano,
Aye.
Councilman Quintero,
Aye.
Councilman Ramos,
Aye.
Salud, Councilman Russo,
Aye.
and Council President Doyle.
Aye. Thank you, Mr.
Claims
Lore.
passed? Yep.
So we have a public portion now. Do we have any members of the public with their hands raised? If you're in the audience, there are 26 participants out there.
Councilman
Yeah, Tony
Suarez has
Soares.
his hands up. Yep.
Excuse me?
Former Councilman Soares is here to
Thank you.
speak.
Okay.
Hi, Tony Soares. I'm hearing this comment about state takeover, and I just want to say, like, I was there when in 2005 when there was rumors of a state takeover, which eventually came. One of the things you have to remember, if the state was to take over, before they come in, their job, they'll just say to you, raise taxes. They're not here. They're not going to, they don't come in and look at your budget right now at this point. Hoboken's a wealthy city in the state's eyes. They're not going to understand why we have a budget problem. They're going to just say, raise revenue, that's our, So and if the state does come in, they will raise taxes like they did in 2007 or 2005, which took it to two years more. Back when the Hoboken had like only a $70 million budget when Mayor Zimmer came into office, and then it was raised by Judy Tripodi. So the idea that it has to be taken seriously, but it's not a fallback position by any means, and it's really bad for the city and just for all of us. And the other thing, I just don't understand why we keep getting into this situation every year. Every year there's finger pointing, and I find it hard to believe that based on tweets today and social media and emails going back and forth, that, I read one that was found quite offensive that, like, Councilman Jabor and Councilman Ramos just go along and they're not doing any work, which I find that hard to believe. And it seems like only one or two people are doing all the budgeting meetings. That's just, here we get into election season, and I don't believe any of it. But what I do think is we have to start looking at what you're spending throughout the year. I mean, I hear things like, let's buy the YMCA, let's renovate this, let's do that. And we're spending money, I mean, before, that's not even in the budget the last year that you approved. You're spending money for tons of new things. We fund lawsuits for residents around town. We decide to, on a whim, sue Exxon. I mean, these are just things that were those even in the budget, and where does that money come from when money is spent that wasn't planned for? And then everybody is like shocked that there's, what is that from Casablanca, that there's gambling in the casino? Like, everybody's shocked that we're in this situation. I mean, we should be embarrassed. Everybody should be embarrassed that we're in this financial shape. We have one of the wealthiest cities in the state, one of the best revenue tax collections in the country. And we're always at this situation where we're looking back and going, oh boy, how did we get here? How did we get here? And I'm not looking for a response from any council person, just my opinion as a taxpayer, a resident. And when we talk about affordable housing, all these taxes get passed right on to the people you say you care about. So let's remember that. So when we decide to spend, $500,000 on a lawsuit, or give grants for people to renovate their kitchens in buildings they don't own. I mean, or just, paint a new lane somewhere that wasn't planned. That's, and we go, oh, well, it's paid for with a grant. Well, a grant is not a full funding. So we end up paying for that too. So every time we look at something, I mean, and this is all elementary and you all know this, but I just wanted to remind everyone that, this idea that why are we always in this situation? This problem should be looked at the beginning of the year, not at the end of the year. The, so that's just my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soros. Former Councilman Jerry, are there more?
Yep, there's more. Hold on 1 second.
You have it, Jerry. You want some help?
I got it.
Okay.
Yep. Denny Ajmani is here to speak.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Good evening, Council. Many of you brought up the name of Jason Freeman. I was there in the room when he made that presentation about the city being at the edge of a fiscal cliff. He has the most visibility into our budget, and for him to say that, I definitely took it to heart. I'm sure you guys did as well. What he pointed out was that the council uses gimmicks and band-aids to paper over almost the structural deficit. What I'm surprised is that council this year is doubling down on those gimmicks and band-aids. Either you don't believe in what Jason said and you don't think it's true that we are at the edge of a fiscal cliff, or you do believe it but choose to ignore it. The previous speaker very clearly said what needs to be said, which is when it comes to spending, I know there have been many unanimous votes where the bonding has been approved. I know there was not a single no on the police contract. Those are the times to show that you're fiscally responsible. Now it's too late. And I feel like instead of addressing what Jason had raised, we're just adding to the problem. So I'm hoping that what the memo that Caleb is putting together will give us some visibility into the size of the structural deficit, what are the sources of the structural deficit. So at least for next year, this council can start working on addressing those issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ajmani.
Okay, we have, I'm going to let Manuel Rivera Soler in. Manny, can you hear us?
You're on mute, Manny. There you go.
Yes. Thank you, Council President. Good evening, Council President, Council, members of the public. Thank you very much for this meeting, Council President. There are a lot of issues. Many members of the public, rather, spoke earlier or before me, made good points. I will not reiterate their points. I would just say that in regards to the budget, it always is a sensitive topic, especially when you, not you, sir, but when the city decides to go into the funds that are saved for the rainy day and such, and do the hocus pocus with the different things that were mentioned in regards to the Hoboken parking utility and the health group. All of these things really give pause to people when they expect better, when they expect a more balanced budget, and not speaking about a budget in July when nobody's around. It's hard to have confidence. I'm not bashing anyone. I'm just saying it's very, very hard. So I will reserve more of my comments for when the meeting is held in person, and hopefully we could discuss and more members of the public can come in and ask, why is the tax levy where it is, and why are we taking money from the Division of Housing, even though, again, they spend less, they spend more. Don't do it. But anyway, I would also like to say, Council President, if I could, there was an issue which seems kind of not important, but it is. It is important for members of the public, especially members of the public, residents of the 6th Ward and in Washington. And perhaps it's already been resolved, I believe. But the removing of benches without notification to members of the public and people who actually need to sit down when they are walking. I, as a person with a disability, do need benches, at least somewhere in the avenue and in other places. But it is important to at least inform the communities. Let me tell you, Council President, Council, and members of the public, I walk around, I go around, this is like they say, crazy season, election season, and people stop me and say, Manny, what happened here? And I said, well, I think the issue was resolved. It was mentioned a lot in social media, but that's not the way it should work in our city. Seniors and, again, persons with disability, persons with parents, they need to know that there's a reliable place to sit whenever and at the time that they need it. So even though those benches were at least in those communications that were made through social media, because there was nothing official, but were said that they were going to be replaced, but that's the point. There should have been some kind of information next to or by those benches so that people can know, hey, don't panic, the benches are coming back, or wait until you have the actual benches that you're going to replace the old ones, if that is the case. And I hope, again, a little footnote, that we use, hopefully that the ones that we're getting, pardon me, the ones that are being used in other municipalities, such as in Union City, where when you touch them, they are cool to the touch. So that was kind of like a pet peeve and a question that was, again, brought up. I know that there are greater issues, but this is also an important issue because it goes to quality of life for our community, and especially the 6th Ward, where it has no direct representation. And this is why people come to myself, and I'm sure to you guys, but we need to communicate more, is what I'm trying to say in my message here with my long rambling, Council President. And I appreciate you listening. And again, I expect to hear more from you in the actual meeting regarding the budgets. And I pray for everyone. And with that, I say, God bless you and God bless Hoboken. Thank you, Council President, for the meeting. Thank you all.
Mr. Manny, thank you. Jerry?
That looks like all the speakers for tonight's special meeting.
Okay.
Motion to close public portion.
Second.
All in
All
favor?
those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Anyone opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
All
All
in
those in
favor?
favor again?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Stay cool.
I'll see everyone at the next council meeting, August 20th. Enjoy your summer, everyone.
Thanks, Jerry.
And happy
Jerry.
early birthday to Council President.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Happy birthday, Jim.
Happy birthday.
We don't count
Happy
anymore.
birthday.
Jim.
You all.
Happy birthday.
Bye.